This is Lightning Matt from Lightning 3D Creations.
And here we have my stripped down Tronxy X5SA. This was my first Tronxy printer. Ran into some issues on it just due to maintenance items that I needed to do. So today I was going to spotlight both an upgrade that I'm doing to it and some tender loving care maintenance that I did on it. So the actual upgrade I'm doing today is to mount my SKR 1.4 turbo board from BQ with its 2209 drivers, TFT 35 screen, and a BL Touch probe. So right now I'm going to focus on the actual physical electronics enclosure and the routings for all the wiring. So for this first video, I'm just basically going to show mounting the main box. Has a couple spots for the fans to go on. Has the main box assembly. The TFT 35 screen. The power supply mount. The mount for the buck boards. If you need these, it's an adder. If you don't need it, then you don't need to add this in. The actual stand that it'll mount on. Now I modified the stand from my first design. This stand actually has a spot for the power switch to mount directly into it. Has its own little enclosure there for where the power switch comes in and the wiring comes up from below, and its own cover. And then you have the channels where the wiring will run through to keep them all nice and hidden. The channels themselves, I designed it so that these print as two parts. Every one except for this tiny one I printed as a single piece standing up. But for all these I printed as two pieces lying flat like so. The thinner side here has little tabs on it. Let's see if you can see those. The tabs will hold it together. And for this one here, I left it separate because the way it's going to mount into the boxes you'll see later on, I did not need to glue them. But for these longer ones, I went ahead and put some glue on it. I got a little spot of glue there I need to clean up. But glued them together just so they'll be nice and firm. There's no reason for them to come apart later on. The wiring will run through them, and I'll show you that. And then this one channel, again, I'll show you later on, but I went ahead and drilled an extra hole in it to put a mount on it for where it goes. And then I have the actual channel connection boxes, just like before. Change them slightly around just for the, made them a little bit more simpler to print and simpler to mount. For where they're going to go. So this one here's the bottom one. It's got spots for the wires to come in 3 different locations. Has an easy little lid that prints with it. Has a couple of tabs on the bottom that fit into slots on here. And then it has a screw at the top that screws in. Same thing for the second channel box. Spot for the channels to go through. A couple of tabs on the bottom. And again a single screw at the top to mount it. The top one here, I wanted to make it nice and small for where it was. It's a little bit too small, but I like it, so I'm going to keep it this way. Because it was so small, I only had a spot really for one screw to mount through, so I made a little tab assembly that would fit in here. You can kind of see it there. I'll show you later on when I do the assembly. And then the top box, again, just the main box for the wiring coming off of the cable chain to come in to hide the excess wire, and spot for a common point for all the quick disconnects. And we'll show you those assemblies. So today we're going to focus on putting all this on the printer frame.
So the first thing I did was rotate the Z motors 180 degrees to put their wire connection on the front side of the machine. That way the wire runs from my new box are shorter and neater. Simple to do. You just loosen and remove the 2 bolts from the bottom of the bracket that lead up into the motor, rotate the motor around, put the bolts back in, tighten them down. This can be done easily by laying the machine on its side. So one of the other mods I did to this unit while I had it apart was to extend the feet up some. The unit needed a little bit extra height for some of the mods I was doing to it. I didn't want to make it too high, and I wanted to keep the same rubber feet for the anti-vibration that they provided. So I just printed these little cup extensions. Used the existing rubber feet with a 30mm screw. Runs through the center bolt hole on that. They sit in the recess so they're nice and firm, held in. put the T-nut on the back side of it, and then tighten them back down to their original position. And there you have it, a simple little height extension mod. These will be shared online also. See the comments below for the Thingiverse link. And then I got to the actual build. I had already gone through and sized up everything and verified that the screws fit in all the holes. Check tightness of everything put together, but I wanted to capture this all on video. There was a few things I adjusted as I went. But first I went through, lined up as much as I could, and did as much assembly as I could before actually attaching anything to the frame. Lining up the switch into the base, into the stand, lining up the main board box onto the stand and getting its bolts tight, and then lining up the power supply mount to align with both the stand and the board box. So I attached all that together and then continued on. So once I had the stand assembly ready, I mounted it to the side of the 2020 extrusion and the riser. There's 4 bolts that hold this together. 3 of them go through the side, and then 1 goes to the top here. So you have to put this last bolt in with its T-nut in after the other 3 are lined up. This is also why I had to put the feet to raise up the unit, because the stand itself actually goes lower than the 2020 extrusion. Following mounting the stand, you go through and you line up the channels, attach the boxes, and get everything square. The channels themselves snap into the boxes, so they really don't need to have anything to hold them up. The boxes themselves bolt into the 2020 extrusion. Now this top channel run here that I left in 2 pieces, I do have a bolt to hold it against the frame, just because it made it a little bit easier to run the wires down in to have that open. Then once I ran the wires, I put the cover on it and closed everything up. I sized up all the covers to make sure they all fit in nice and snug. Went ahead and attached them initially, then went back through and removed them all so I could run the wires in. This is what it looks like. You got the spot for the board box, the spot for the power supply, spot for the power switch, which I removed so I could do everything in the wiring together, places for the various wires to come through, and all their nice little runs. Following this, I put all the hardware back onto the unit, and then I started doing the actual wiring. I ran new wires on the power supply to have them longer, so that the power switch and power supply could fit together easily, and I could wire it up without having to reach inside the unit. Once I got those wires connected and tightened down, I installed the power supply and connected it in. It has a bolt that goes through the top and 2 bolts that go through the bottom that line up to hold it in nice and firm. After getting the power supply in, I started running all the other wires. I have extension wires that go from the board box area up to the main box on the back for all the various motors, hot end, extruder, things like that. The heaters all come through that bottom channel. So the board heater and the hot end heaters wires both come through the bottom. For the bottom channel, the wires actually run through the channel past this power switch and up into the board box area. I said you don't necessarily have to keep them separate. I just like to do that in case there is a heat issue or an electromagnetic issue. Once all the extension wires were run, I went through and replaced all the covers for the various channels and went up to the front end of the unit. Connecting up the board to all the various wires was rather easy. Plenty of room to work inside the box. One thing I should mention was the power supply wires and the heater wires I connected before mounting the board box into its location. And then the various other wires I just plugged in as I needed to and cleaned up their wire runs. After I got all the various wire runs in, put the cover on the board box. I haven't mounted the fans yet, that'll come later. Then I mounted the power supply cover, and then I went over to the TFT screen. Thank you for watching. This was Lightning Matt from Lightning 3D Creations.